Alright everybody, it's Friday morning and I got a lot to get done here in the fish room over the weekend hopefully. So instead of trying to get it all in one video or trying to do a lot of videos and get caught up on everything, I'm going to start by doing a round the world update and we're going to go over all the stuff I'd like to get done. How much of it I'll actually get done, we'll see. And how much of it I just go ahead and do versus how much of it I actually shoot video of, we will also have to wait and see. For this tank, this is my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank, and I don't really have any plans on doing anything to this. I may do a water change. At the very least, I'm just going to go ahead and top it off. It's getting a little low on water, but, you know, water change probably wouldn't hurt. Maybe getting in there and doing a little bit of cleaning. You can see those plants have come uprooted and are stuck to the filter intake, and I got some stuff on the wire in the back that needs to get cleaned out. It's some dead plant material, so I might get in there and do a little tiny bit of very brief maintenance and a minor water change, but that's about it that's going on in this tank, nothing specific. My gourami tank here is more or less in need of a water change. It's due for a water change, and the main thing I want to do in here is thin out the water sprite. You can see how much of it I've got in there now, and it's really just growing out of control and blocking a lot of the light. When I use my good camera and set it up on the tripod, it's actually so dimly lit on this side of the tank that you really can't see anything at all. I actually have to adjust the lighting when I'm editing just to bring it up so you can see this side of the tank. So we really need to do something about all of the roots and all of this water sprite that's hanging in here. Although I gotta say, it looks absolutely awesome when the fish are swimming around and hanging out in the roots there. I just love these hanging roots. I do want to try to give you a little bit of a look at what it looks like under the hood here, because this is lace leaf water sprite, and that gives you an idea of how thick it is in there, and you can see how thin those little leaves are. And then of course you can see the wider leaves, those are regular water sprite. So that's the lace leaf that looks like that. And again, it gives you an idea of how thick it's growing in there. Let's see what it looks like from the other end. And see, this end I get, this is probably the end where I feed them more often, because I can actually get to the water surface. And then over here again, it's just pretty much nothing but plants. So that needs to get cleaned out and thinned out. And then my angelfish tank, this one really needs some actual work done to it. If it'll ever focus, there we go. The main thing I need to do in here is I want to remove all of the remains of this temple plant. They finally just sort of died and gone away completely. I'm getting a lot of that green cyanobacteria growth. It's not a real problem in this tank, but it does grow in spots, and if I don't stay on top of it, it starts taking over. And this is one area where it's really sort of taken off here recently. I've never really noticed a lot of green on these water sprite, but as the temple plant. But as the temple plant has died off, it's developed this bacteria growing on it as well, and you can see down here in the substrate there's some more of it growing. So I'm partly in the process of vacuuming the gravel out of here. I'm going to switch it over and put darker gravel in. I started doing that quite a while ago and I never really got finished doing it, but we're going to get working on that some more here soon, just because it's time to do a nice water change on this tank, and while I'm in there I may as well suck some of the gravel out simultaneously. There's another patch of that green cyanobacteria growing in there. My Nubius is doing great, growing on the rocks and growing on the wood in there. So this tank is probably going to wind up with just the Nubius and some floating water sprite, and this is another one that I need to get in there and just do a little bit of thinning out. It's just starting to get a little bit thick and overgrown on the top, but because I have the Serpé tetras in here, which are a little nippy, and I have a little bit of aggression between my angelfish, it's actually nice to have a lot of roots and a lot of plant cover in here. It gives the fish a place to go, and it gives them a way to sort of break up the aggression and the nippiness. So we'll see what happens with this one. The main goal is to start vacuuming more of this gravel out, get these patches of cyanobacteria out, and get that nasty, ugly looking dead plant out of the corner. And then we will see where we go from there. My black ghost knife fish tank just needs a water change and the glass wiped down. You can see how green the glass is, how much stuff I've got growing on it. So that might even require my razor blade to get in there and scrape it off rather than just wiping it down. And I might take this temple plant here in the front and trim that down and maybe cut that in half, because again, when you look in here, you can see it's getting kind of up and overgrown, so we're getting pretty close to the surface on that one too. So we'll see what happens with that, but mainly I need to get that glass wiped down and then just do a water change. And I could probably do a filter change on this one too. It's about time. I haven't done one in a while. My 20 long open top, probably just do a little bit of a water change and a gravel vac. If you actually notice in here, if you look at the bottom, there's just tons and tons of mulm and just fish waste and everything. This tank's not real heavily stocked in the sense that it's got a lot of big fish and a lot of biomass. It just has a lot of small fish in it, and it adds up pretty quickly. So this tank again is one that's going to be coming down fairly soon. All these fish are going to be relocated and rehomed. It's just something that I'm not in any huge hurry to do. I'm actually waiting probably until the weekend of Black Friday, and hopefully the tank I want to get that will replace this end, the tanks I've got down at this end of the room, these 3 of them, hopefully will be on sale on Black Friday, cheap enough that we'll be able to start moving ahead with my plans down here. My brackish tank looks fantastic. I did a double back-to-back treatment for the red slime cyanobacteria, the Ultralife product, the red slime stain remover. And the first treatment made a noticeable difference. The second treatment really made a huge dent in it. And now that it's been a couple of days since I finished the other treatment, I'm actually looking, and it seems to be dying off more. There are clearly patches where it's not fully dead, and I will have issues with it coming back. Right here is a perfect example. You can see how dark, rich, and red that looks. That will certainly come back and start growing again. I mean, you can even see how it's still in partial sheets in some places. So I'm actually considering doing some more work on this tank. I never really want to do it because it's kind of a pain in the butt, and I don't want to disturb Butterbean any more than I have to, but I may just take those rocks out briefly. I don't have to boil them or anything like that. I can just pull them out, scrub them with a scrub brush under hot water, and put them back in, and that will remove the bulk of it. And then I've certainly got enough stuff left. I could do another back-to-back 2 treatments in a row for the red slime cyanobacteria, and that would probably do it out of the tank. The only issue would be, is there any growing up above the water line that's going to stay alive? Is there any on the filters or in the filter intakes that's going to stay alive? I would have to get in there and really do a lot of sterilization to clean this stuff back once and for good. It's thoroughly in this tank. So probably not going to do that. The original plan was just to whack it back hard enough that it'll stay under control for another, basically until the, Black Friday weekend, and maybe I can get a tank to replace this end. Again, these 3 tanks on this end of the room. And when I do that, I can move everybody over into the new tank that I have set up, more or less waiting. It's pretty much ready to go. I just have to move the fish over there, and I probably have to bring the salinity up a little bit more, but we'll get into that when we get around to that. The tank down here is my quarantine tank. I have a single Cory cat in there, and it came out of my black ghost knife fish tank, and I noticed his barbels were missing. I think the reason his barbels are missing is because of the tiger barbs in that tank, and I think that's what nipped them off, not the coarse substrate, as has been suggested by some people. I have other Corys, even the same species of Corys, in other tanks that have the exact same substrate, and I've never had an issue. I've never had an issue with Corys losing their barbels in any of my tanks. It's only that tank that has tiger barbs in it, which are notoriously nippy fish, and the other 3 Corys I had in there all died. So I don't know whether they were killed or they didn't make it in the water or what, but I have reason to believe that it was the tiger barbs in there, not the substrate. At any rate, the Cory in there is still doing fine. It does not look like the barbels are going to grow back. I think they were too far gone, but he's doing okay, and I'm going to leave him in there for a little while longer, and then he's probably going to go into my tank in the living room upstairs where there is another single Cory, and then that way they will each have a little companion. But that's all that's really going on in my quarantine tank at the moment. My snail tank is just that. It's nothing more than snails in the tank. And actually, now that I'm saying this, I just remembered I went and picked up some snails from my local fish store the other day, yesterday afternoon in fact, and I forgot and left them in my truck. So when I'm done this video, I need to run outside, and hopefully I'm not going to have a bag of dead snails in my truck. This is my T-bar / gudgeon tank. I've never really thought of a name for this tank that I like that works, so it's just kind of gotten stuck called my T-bar gudgeon tank, whatever. It needs a water change and maybe wipe the glass down a little bit. This tank is still kind of new by fish tank standards, and I still do get a little bit of the diatom buildup, so wiping the glass down probably wouldn't hurt, although I did that very recently. The main thing that's going on with this tank is, if you can hear that noise, that is really annoying. And these Tetra Whisper brand filters, and that's the Whisper EX, the swanky one that's supposed to be better for biofiltration, and that is the size for a 70-gallon tank. They work pretty well. They're great for the price you pay for them, but you only get, in my experience, a couple of years out of them before they start rattling and wearing out. And I think I actually got some grit up in that one not long ago, and the grit is what caused the noise to begin. It really was never that noisy before, but it is now. So I've got my new filter. I need to put it together and install it. That is a 303B. It is a slightly smaller version than the normal canister filter most people are used to seeing. This is the same size I have on my other 40-gallon tank, the Black Ghost Knifefish that we just looked at. And so that is something else I need to do. And again, I don't know if I'm going to shoot video of that or not. I've already shot video of me assembling and installing two of those filters, the 404B and the 303B. So they're in there in my playlist somewhere, probably in the not necessarily how-to playlist, if you want to dig through that, or maybe I'll try to find a card and attach it. So that's all that's really going on in this tank, simple water change, but I am going to install a new filter, and that means we'll be able to get all that stuff out of the back. It's got not only the filter from the actual filter, it has an internal UV filter as well that takes up a bunch of space in that back corner, so I'll be able to pull that out all together since I've got an internal UV filter in the 303B, so that will no longer be necessary, and I'll be able to get... You like that ugly mug? He really is a cool fish, but my camera never wants to pick him up the way his colors match the background colors. The camera has a really hard time finding and focusing on him. So anyway, moving on. My 125 is, well, let's walk over here and get on the other side of the room. It's about the only way we can get the whole thing in. 125 needs a water change, but not, you know, anything massive or complicated or anything like that. I don't need to change the filter out. I really don't even need to get in there and wipe the glass. But what I do need to do is, while the filter is, or the water is changing, I need to get in there and trim out that not quite floating water sprite that you can see in the tank. That big massive green across the whole top of that tank is actually one single plant. The root mass in the middle is where I've got it anchored underneath a piece of driftwood that's leaning up against a rock, and that's what holds it in place. Although the size it is now, it doesn't really have any choice. It can't float or move anywhere. You can see down at this end we've got some roots that are trailing and hanging. That is all new plants that are growing off of this, and you can see it goes almost to the end of the tank. It's just getting absolutely enormous in there. This is the biggest water sprite plant I've ever seen, but it is all one plant. And again, when we get to this end, you can see more roots hanging down, so those are actually the babies growing off of the same mother plant, as I think of it. So this is another one that is just really blocks a ton of the light, and again, with my other camera, when I point it over here, you just don't see much of anything. In fact, what you see is a lot of glare from the other side of the room. I have to kind of stand close and angle down, which gives you very little light in the bottom of the tank. So that really needs to get in there and get cleaned out. It's interesting the way the plant itself twists as it grows. So this one's not growing out of control out of the top of the tank or anything like that, but I could certainly get in there and thin a lot of that stuff out and thin a lot of that growth in the center to actually open it up and allow light to come through. If you see up there, there's branches that go off the main branch. I don't know why my camera's having such a hard time focusing today. You know, so I can leave the main body, the main branches, like this branch for example, I can leave intact and then just cut branches like that off that flow into the middle of the tank and block light. This branch here is another good example that's growing down and into the tank. Excuse me. That's one that I can get in there and trim out. So I'm not going to be removing that. I'm not going to be destroying all that beautiful water sprite that has taken so long to actually grow into that size and become so impressive. But it is a lot of maintenance. I got to get in there quite often and cut branches out of it and thin it out and carefully groom it, and specifically groom it in the way I want it to grow and shape in order to give me enough light in the tank as well as give me the look I want. So that's really the only thing we got going on in this tank. Excuse me again. This is my new brackish tank that has nothing and nobody in it yet. It's just got some Java fern in there, and I've been slowly bringing the salinity of this tank up. I haven't actually checked it, so I'm not sure what it is yet, but I know it's not up to full salinity yet. The reason I'm doing that is because the Java fern, it suffers if you just throw it from fresh straight into brackish water. If I just brought this up to brackish salinity, the Java fern gets stunted. It will survive, in my experience, it always has, but it doesn't grow well if you do that. I'm not sure why, but it just shocks it and it never really recovers or does well. Moneywort, which I hope to acquire soon, but I'm having trouble finding it at the moment. Moneywort, in my experience, you can just slap right into brackish water and it'll be fine. So once this tank's up to brackish salinity, if I do get some Moneywort, I can just put that right in there. And at some point I will probably be putting a Marimo moss ball in there, which I like, and those do well. Just you can throw them right in. You can throw them right into a marine tank and they do just fine. And of course my signature water sprite that I love so much. I may put some water sprite in here, and in my experience that's never had any issue with brackish water either. You can just plop it right in. The only reason I don't keep it in my brackish tank that's up and running now is because it gets that cyanobacteria growing all over it and it's just nasty. So as long as I can keep this tank from being cross-contaminated when I bring everybody over, you know, and this tank is going to stay nice and clean looking like this, then we should be good to go, and I should have a nicely planted brackish tank here in the very near future. Again, really look forward to and think about sort of that Black Friday weekend when the weather starts getting colder. I'm going to be spending more time in here, and then we'll really ramp up the amount of videos and projects and stuff I do over the winter. Last, and I guess in this case we can probably say even least, this is my crayfish tank. It's down to just 2 crayfish. The plants are doing you know, I don't have a very good light in here. I didn't really set this up to be any kind of permanent whatever. It was just sort of a fun little play tank to go for the summer. I've had a lot of fun with the crayfish in there. I caught some minnows and put them in there at one point. We watched all them slowly get devoured one by one, etc. So we're kind of winding down for this tank. Pretty soon I'll be releasing the 2 crayfish that remain in there. I may actually release them on the end of a fish hook. You never know. I'll probably just walk them down the street to the stream where I got them and just throw them back. They've been my little pet crayfish all summer, so you know, just out of a courtesy to them, I'll release them rather than use them as bait. But next spring, you know, they're game again. If I catch them again next spring, they're going to be bait. So at any rate, that is pretty much the end of the Round the World tour. We're back to where we started at my 29 miscellaneous, and hopefully, like I said, I will be shooting some video, at least of some of the stuff I've got to get done this weekend. So go ahead and subscribe, and that way whatever those videos are, you won't miss any of them. And hopefully I will see you real soon on the next one. Thanks for watching this one.